Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a place, a new facility, deep in the Florida Everglades. It's a spot so remote, so unique, it's already got this nickname, Alligator Alcatraz. Today, our mission in this deep dive is really to cut through the headlines. We want to explore the fascinating, complex, and frankly controversial details of this new migrant detention center. We're drawing insights directly from recent CNN reporting, official statements, that kind of thing.
And it's a topic that definitely needs a closer look. Our goal here is, well, to give you a really solid understanding of what this facility actually is, why it suddenly appeared, and the really wide range of reactions it's getting. We'll help you sort of grasp the critical pieces quickly so you walk away feeling like you genuinely get it.
Right. So this Alligator Alcatraz nickname, it wasn't just, something that popped up online. It was actually coined by Florida's Attorney General, James Youthmeyer, and then Governor Ron DeSantis picked it up too. And the location, wow. Deep in the marshy wetlands of the Everglades, less than 50 miles west of President Trump's Miami resort. But here's what really grabbed me. The site itself. It used to be the Dade Collier Training and Transition Airport. Huge runway, 11,000 feet, meant for supersonic jets back in the day. And then, poof, in just a matter of days, it gets converted into what they're calling a temporary tent city. That speed is just remarkable, isn't it?
It absolutely is. The pace is really striking. You've got President Trump touring the site, CNN reporting the timeline published July 1st, updated the very next day. That kind of speed, well, it tells you a lot about the urgency they're placing on this. It also makes you wonder, what kind of planning, what environmental checks could possibly happen that fast?
Yeah, exactly. And the scale they're talking about is pretty significant too. Initially, officials said it would hold up to 3,000 migrants, possibly more later, though I saw a DHS official mention maybe expectations of up to 5,000 beds. That's a lot of people out there.
It is. And that Alcatraz name, it's not just catchy. It feels very deliberate. Florida officials seem to be aiming for their own version of an inescapable facility. It's not just about holding people. It's about projecting this image of, ultimate control, deterrence. It definitely fits into a certain political narrative about border security.
And the security rationale they're giving, it's pretty stark. Governor DeSantis actually said, and this is a quote, "If someone escapes, there's a lot of alligators you're going to have to contend with." He followed up with, "No one is going anywhere once you do that. It's as safe and secure as you can be." Yeah. And the AG, Youthmeyer, said similar things, even mentioned pythons. The White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, also echoed the idea of alligators as a deterrent. So, given that, what are the actual living conditions like in a place they say is fortified by Mother Nature?
Well, it's described as completely self-contained. Migrants are apparently housed in repurposed FEMA trailers and also these soft-sided temporary facilities.
Basically tents.
Essentially large tents, yeah. Similar to what you'd see after a natural disaster. And these are the only real shelter from the Florida heat, 90-degree days and the big storms. Utilities, water, sewage, power, it's all mobile equipment brought in. They did specifically mention large portable air conditioning units for the structures.
Okay. AC is probably essential there.
Definitely. And given that it is hurricane season, officials say they're developing evacuation plans for severe weather, which, they'd absolutely have to.
Right. Can't rely on the gators for hurricane prep. So, from the Republican viewpoint, this is framed as what? Low cost, fortified by nature, temporary, and needed to take pressure off state law enforcement and jails because of more migrants arriving. They're calling it a force multiplier for detention and deportation, basically boosting their capacity significantly.
Right. A way to increase detention effectiveness.
But that low-cost claim. Let's look at the numbers. The estimate is $450 million to operate for 1 year.
Wow.
Yeah. Florida plans to pay upfront and then get reimbursed by FEMA and DHS.
That $450 million figure,
yeah,
it really puts the scale into perspective, especially when you look at the wider immigration system. I mean, last week, IC had over 58,000 immigrants in custody nationwide.
Yeah.
That's way over their funded capacity of about 41,000. So many end up in local jails. It helps explain the stated need for a place like this, but it also shows the huge financial aspect.
And speaking of money, the land itself has become a whole other issue. There's this really glaring discrepancy that jumped out from the reports. The administration first proposed buying the site from Miami-Dade County for $20 million.
Okay.
But the county mayor, Daniela Levine Cava, pointed out the most recent appraisal, $190 million.
Whoa. $20 million versus $190 million. That's quite a difference.
Right, nearly 10 times. Somebody's got a very different idea of property value out there in the swamp. So given all this, the location, the cost, the purpose, it's maybe not surprising that Alligator Alcatraz has sparked a huge backlash.
Not surprising at all.
But it's the range of the opposition that's really striking. You've got immigrant rights groups, environmentalists, and even members of the state's indigenous community speaking out very strongly. Let's maybe start with the immigrant rights activists. What are they saying?
Well, their language is incredibly strong. They're accusing the DeSantis administration of creating a facility that's, quote, engineered to enact suffering. They're calling it dehumanizing. Thomas Kennedy from the Florida Immigrant Coalition compared it directly to Sheriff Joe Arpaio's old tent city in Arizona.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
He called this Florida plan a bad idea all around, detaining thousands in tents, Florida's summer heat, hurricane season. Another activist, Maria Asuncion Bilbao, called it a theatricalization of cruelty.
Theatricalization of cruelty, that's powerful.
Yeah, and there's real anger about officials almost, like bragging about the alligators and pythons. Kennedy said, when we talk about people as if they're vermin, there's nothing about this detention camp that is not cruel and inhumane.
Very strong words. Okay, so then you have the environmental side. What are their concerns?
The environmental concerns run deep because of where it is. The Dade-Collier Airport site has a long history of environmental scrutiny. It's right in the Everglades, which is absolutely critical for South Florida's freshwater supply.
Right, the drinking water.
Exactly. Mayor Levine Cava specifically raised concerns about housing thousands of people right next to that water source. And it's not just talk. Several groups, like Friends of the Everglades, have actually sued the DeSantis administration to try and stop the project.
Okay, so there's legal action happening. How's the governor responding to that?
Well, Governor DeSantis has pushed back pretty hard. He basically downplayed the lawsuit. He highlighted his administration's work on Everglades restoration, implying they do care about the environment, and stated this facility would have zero impact.
Oh.
He even suggested opponents are just using the Everglades as a pretext because they oppose the immigration enforcement itself.
Interesting. So framing it as a political motive, not a genuine environmental concern from his perspective.
Exactly. It's a clear clash of narratives there.
Okay, but then there's another layer, perhaps the most personal objections, coming from tribal members.
Yeah, Betty Osceola. She's a member of the Mecosiki tribe of Indians of Florida. Their ancestral lands are right next to the airport site. She describes this facility being built on land that's sacred to her people as an affront. She told CNN she actually thought it was a joke at first, until the construction literally started less than 2 miles from her own home and even closer to some of her relatives.
Wow, right on their doorstep, essentially.
Yeah. And she talked about hearing the claim, nobody lives out here, and just being incredulous given her family's presence for generations.
And her perspective ties back into those environmental arguments too, but from a different angle. She really critiques the governor's claims about understanding the environment, saying, quote, signing a bill or signing a check doesn't mean you understand anything. And she raises this really critical point. What happens to all that sewage if a hurricane hits? Where does it go?
Right into the aquifer, potentially affecting the drinking water aquifer for 8 million South Floridians.
Yeah.
That's her specific concern. It connects the human element, the environmental risk, and the indigenous perspective altogether.
And she really summed up her connection to the land, saying, this is our ancestral territory. I come out here to pray. This is our home. We are standing up for our home. It just grounds the whole policy debate in something very tangible and deeply personal, doesn't it?
It really does. So as we sort of wrap up this deep dive, what really stands out is just how layered this story is. You have the, pragmatic needs cited by officials on one side, and then these incredibly deep personal, environmental, and human rights concerns raised by so many different groups on the other. It's just a powerful example of how big policy decisions slam right into geography, people's lives, cultural heritage, creating all these ripples.
Absolutely. It forces you to look at how these huge sums of money, these policy choices impact real people, real communities, and the actual environment they live in. So maybe the final thought to leave you with is this. When you consider the money involved, $450 million a year, the sharply conflicting viewpoints we've heard, the unique environmental stakes. What does building Alligator Alcatraz ultimately tell us about how we're balancing competing priorities and values when we try to tackle really complex societal issues today? Something to chew on.